Welcome back, everyone, to the third segment for October. Archbishop, this is a really important, timely topic. Last year, at the national meeting of the United States Catholic Bishops, you were elected to the position of chair of the Committee for Religious Liberty. That's an important role to play in our service to our national church, and your leadership is greatly appreciated. Today, let's talk about what we mean by that religious liberty topic.
Well, thanks, Brian. And you know, it was the beginning of a standing committee, so this now shows the importance of permanence. A lot of people wonder, well, what do we mean by religious freedom? And by the way, at the end of June, we had the first week-long Religious Freedom Week. And people can still go to the website and see some background if I don't say this clearly enough. But in essence, religious freedom is the first freedom of our nation. It's the bedrock on which we build our freedom, and that is the ability for us to live in a way consistent with our conscience and to bring our faith, which motivates us not just to self-interest, not what's going to be good for me, but rather what does God call us to be good for others. Whenever we talk about religious freedom, of course, we always talk about other parts of the world in which there's terrible oppression. So I never want to forget us and being in solidarity with people. But when we look within the United States, I would narrow it down to three things.
Okay.
I think the first thing I would say is people of faith are called to inspire a culture. We don't impose our religion on others, but we propose things for the good of our nation, and that has been from the very beginning of our nation. The capacity, if you would, to take an interest in our culture, to want to build civility. The second thing we do is we need to make room in our culture so that we can serve other people in a way that doesn't mean we're giving up our faith, with integrity of faith. That's why I so often I've talked about the Little Sisters of the Poor who don't want to sue. They simply want to serve the poorest of people, but they want to do it with the integrity of their faith. They want to do it because it was their love of Christ and following Christ that motivated them to begin with, and people see that uniqueness. So that's the second part. And then the third part of religious freedom is the capacity for us to appreciate the religious freedom and dignity of every person. We live in a nation in which we do not impose our faith on others, and thank God we have that freedom. We also need to have a healthy respect and look for ways to collaborate without giving up our convictions. And so religious freedom, I think, is really an exciting opportunity for us to really serve well, contribute to our culture, and work in a way that, let's say, establishes unity without losing the richness of what we're about.
Reminds me of your famous line, we're called to be good citizens of heaven and earth.
Yes, heaven and earth, exactly. And even, what was the one that someone, I think it was Cardinal Hickey, used to say, we serve other people not because they're Catholic, but because we're Catholic.
Very good.
So that's the whole image of it, of a church that goes out. That's why, Brian, it's a mistake to say, well, it's freedom of worship. It only is what we do for that hour or hour and 15 minutes on a Sunday. No, our freedom of worship, for sure we don't impose things on people, but it's meant to allow us to contribute to the life of our society.
But a lot of Americans get confused around this, and you hear them claim, but there's supposed to be separation of church and state. What are we doing? Help us separate.
Yeah, and of course that particular phrase of separation of church and state is not in the Bill of Rights. It is something that Thomas Jefferson wrote about. But I think the Bill of Rights is very instructive because it basically says in that first amendment, talking about religion, it talks about free speech and the right of assembly too, but in talking about religion, it says basically two things. Non-establishment, in other words, we're not going to establish that the Catholic Church or the Episcopalian Church or Lutheran Church is the church of our nation. So there's no establishment. But secondly, there is a free expression, the ability to express your religion freely. And not to be confined. And so the Supreme Court has cut its teeth on really thorny issues over the last 200 years, and I think has developed a rather reasonable way and common sense way of being able to preserve religious freedom, knowing that there's some limits, but knowing that those limits, we should always be looking for the least restrictive way if there's a government interest that somehow conflicts with religious freedom. I think we're making some good headway with the committee, and of course I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about your committee. Does the committee you chair, are you imagining we'll end up with some new approaches, or maybe some hopes you have for the committee's work?
Well, you know, there's, I guess, two major areas. One is just our ongoing education, the way in which we promote an attitude. I know you and I talked about this, that I asked one of the committee members, Bishop Barron, who's done some great work on Word on Fire, to work especially with me and with the committee in the effort of coming up with carefully selected language. We know that people need to be proud of religious freedom, but they need to hear it in a way that emphasizes the right language, that doesn't it's always going to be truthful. It's not trying to hide what it is, but rather to present it accurately to the modern ear. So, for example, to find ways where we truly convey the notion we are proposing and not imposing. We are creating freedom for people, even people who disagree with each other, to still be able to serve in a good way. And so that's been an exciting way to and I think we've already begun to do some things in that area.
Of course, lots of people know Bishop Barron from his other work, and I know there's other great members of the committee. What's going on, though, that makes even the words religious freedom, religious liberty sound slightly contentious? It almost
yeah. In many ways, I think we can say a couple of things about it, but I think the most fundamental thing is there's this notion of my truth and your truth.
Yeah.
That, well, that's your truth, not my truth. And when there's no effort to seek, well, what is good and true for our society, then the alternative is to impose my truth. And so there's an awful lot of shouting down that is being done if somebody doesn't agree. And so one of our tasks will be to promote civility. As the old idea, I can disagree with you without being disagreeable. And in fact, we need a society that brings together people who are concerned about the common good, but may have different visions. And we need to be able to present the vision of our Christian faith as a way that I think can help all people. And I think that's where the contention is sometimes people quickly say, well, then you're imposing it on others.
That is really helpful, because that makes it, sometimes in promoting freedom, it's almost advocates are saying, to promote freedom, take away someone else's freedom so mine gets there.
That's exactly right. And I'll tell you, we have to be smart, we have to be logical, we have to have a good heart. I mean, it's going to take all of our being to be able to really promote religious freedom well.
Well, this is one of those topics we could unpack for 3 whole segments of the show, and thanks for your leadership there. This is a great and sensitive issue, but this is a good example where I think the Catholic people in our country turn to the bishops and say, "Help us with this. This is a complex issue." So thank you for your leadership.
Thanks, Brian.
Very good. And thank you all for being with us this October as we've gone through another very fast show. We'll be back next month with the November edition. Have a good day.